Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm happy to be with you and to meditate together with you and to explore Dharma, our relationship to Dharma, and what really is it that supports us each the best. And one of the things we often say is that um, it's not just one, as we all know, it's not just one way for everyone, right? What works, what's needed, what's supportive of any endeavor in life. Here we're talking about Dharma. It's not going to be what works and what's the best fit for one person isn't uh, best for everyone. And I wanted to explore this idea. We've talked about it from time to time, and I want to come back to it from a particular angle tonight. I was I've mentioned here before that I have a teenage son who's a jazz trombone player, and he's a good player. Um, and I was speaking with his teacher about a few different approaches people have. One of the big parts of jazz music, as I'm sure most of us know, is it's an improvisational musical form. And so a big piece in jazz is like what supports people in the expression of that improvised music. So I was reading this came up because I am reading a book now about the making of the Miles Davis famous jazz album, Kind of Blue. And it's interesting. It just goes through a lot of what led up to in the days and years leading up to the recording. And there's 2 days in the studio. And one of the things they're talking about is the form and the structure of the music. And it was a time I have to be a little careful what I'm about to say. I know a little bit about music, but only enough to probably get it wrong. But they were moving into a form called modal jazz. And I know a little bit about, I won't try to explain it. I have a basic understanding of what we mean when we say modes and modal jazz. But basically, they were moving away from using structures, um, traditional chord progressions, or I should scale patterns that could be very supportive in certain ways, but had its own limitations. And in this new form, working with modes and using those structures, but in a way that then took them beyond the structure so that it became just this free expression. There's just a mood of feeling, something that's alive that gets expressed. And it's not about any structure at all, but the structure was there, but it wasn't uh, uh, so apparent in the final product. So with my son, he does know some about the theory, studies the theory and practices, but he actually finds he's at a place where he just wants to, he's got a very good musical ear and he just wants to follow the feeling and the sound where he wants to go. And if the structure comes in too much, he finds that it clogs him up or boxes him in a way, and he doesn't feel like he can express that feeling that freely in his improvisation. And his teacher was saying that, there are some people like that, and then other people are quite the opposite. There are people for whom in order to really express in their improvisation, they need to have a real conscious awareness come in there with them of where they are within the chord structure or the scale. And that's very much alive in their consciousness. And if they didn't have that, it'd be the opposite of how it was for my son. They didn't have that, they would be lost. It just wouldn't work. And so the teacher was talking about how everybody comes into this differently, but what he considered to be kind of the sweet spot is where you're thoroughly, deeply versed in the theory. And you also have kind of have attuned yourself to your own ear and your own feeling and how to express. And then you move back and forth between how much the actual structure is alive in your consciousness when it needs to support you or when it's let go more, but it's always there, but it may or may not be in your consciousness so much. And it's kind of like that. And I was reflecting uh, on really, it's kind of like this place in the Dharma, it can be similar. Buddhism, for example, is It's very complex. I would say that Dharma, my take on it is that it's not complex. It's actually quite simple. But actualizing the Dharma in our lives isn't necessarily, as we all know, that's what this path of practice is all about. And it's a lifetime, or if you believe traditional Buddhist cosmology, lifetimes of practice and applying ourselves to deeply actualize the potential of what the Dharma is pointing to. But it's actually something very simple. So Buddhism ostensibly is a structure that grew and developed from, of course, from the time of the Buddha, and it's become a religion, or as some people think of it, a family of religions that are, can trace back to the Buddha. So all these different flavors of Buddhism, have very different feelings and styles to them, but the intention is all to be a support for this simple thing, Dharma. And so it's kind of similar. I was reflecting, like I was saying about my son in playing jazz music, that, you can get very, very complex in Buddhism. And actually, what really brought this up for me is, you may not be paying attention, but I moved on purpose into this room where behind me there's a blank, empty bookcase with these wires hanging down. It just happens to be, they're putting some lights and some work in here, because it struck me, compared to the room I normally sit in, is filled with bookcases, just Buddhist books, tons of them. And it's really complicated, all of that stuff. And you can take I'm not going to go tonight into all these different teachings, but I would just, for example, I'll just name one. Some of you, probably most of you, have heard these lists, these structures in which the teachings have been put together. Some of you may not know, but one very important one, at least in Theravada Buddhism, is called dependent origination. And it's a list, it's got these 12 steps or 12 links in it. I won't go into it, but it's basically talking about the process of causation, if you will, conditioning. One step causes or gives rise to or conditions the next step, and laying out sort of the process that creates suffering, if you will. And there's more to it than that, but that's good enough for now. And by bringing some awareness to that, you can use that structure to help us then see, well, what's causing the suffering, as a way to help us end that process of creating suffering. So there's this list of 12 links. Just that one list of dependent origination. I don't know how many books I have on my bookshelf, just commentaries and explorations and different people's approaches or understandings or takes on and teasing apart dependent origination. So that one thing, some people spend their whole life getting subtler and subtler in their understandings on this one thing. It can get very complicated, is my point. And that's true probably for every teaching, every list of teachings, every aspect. Just in Theravada Buddhism, you could just fill a library, and there are libraries filled. And then you add all the other branches of Buddhism in there. And literally, there are libraries full of suttas and sutras, Sanskrit, sutta and Pali, teachings, commentaries, modern and ancient, and it just goes on and on. It's quite complicated. That can be very supportive. You don't have to learn, nobody's going to learn all of those, but within a particular system, whichever system we practice in, and some of us may not even be in the Buddhist system. There's other Dharma systems out there that are more Hindu oriented, and other spiritual and religious traditions, of course. You pick any one of them, and there's a lot of complexity, a lot of teachings, a lot of detail that we can explore and study. And that, in a sense, I think of as like in jazz, when you're learning the scales and chord structures and modes and all the stuff I was talking about earlier. It's kind of like that, right? And but at some point, it becomes more like this empty shelf back here, right? Where those drop away, and there's just a few things of essence that are foundational to support us. And so a piece of this I'll come back around to is it's like, well, support us to what? Where's the Dharma pointing to? What is the simple thing that the Dharma is pointing to? And then the question is, I think for all of us is how much do we bring in the structure, the systems, the teachings consciously? Some of us really want to study and learn these things, and many practitioners aren't drawn to, or for whatever reason don't go into or explore these teachings that much, and they just pick it up through, well, talks like this, being around other people, their own investigation, being around friends, whatever, and you get what you need, and it's mainly just these simpler practices. And so for all of us, it's an interesting place. I hope you all are, or have been. If not, we'll consciously take some time to reflect on, just bring to mind how much we want to engage in the systems and the structures and the methods, um, and how much we want it sort of all drops away and just gets to something very simple. It's this balance of simplicity and complexity in a way, and the interplay there. And I think most people kind of move, you may not be that conscious of it, but we may be consciously bringing in certain structures or systems or teachings sometimes and applying them. And other times those may drop away more and we're just more into more of a basic flow of our state of consciousness and how we're relating to what's going on and letting go and opening the heart. And it's just very simple like that. So that's kind of the background I wanted to bring in, but I have just a little bit more I want to share for tonight. Because what I have in mind doing over the next few weeks together is I've been reflecting on this idea of what is of essence in the Dharma. And I have to be careful. It's certainly not for me to say. I can come to my own uh, sense of my best understanding of the intellectual understanding of the teachings, and then putting them into practice. This is what happens, right? We put things into practice and then we start to see for ourselves what works, what supports me, what doesn't support me. And so we come to what's most alive and what's true for each one of us. So I'm certainly not, I think it'd be arrogant for me to say, well, here's what's of essence. Let me tell you that, or for anyone to tell us that. But I want to throw a few different things out in the service of that we can all together reflect on them, and you may come up to your own formulation of really what's of essence. But keeping in mind the complexity that we can bring in if we need to. Uh, um, but the real emphasis here is kind of how can we get it down to something simple. And as I've been reflecting on it, what I'm thinking of for a little bit, I don't know how much time I'll have tonight, but I'll get started. And over the next few weeks is I realize that for myself, I can articulate when I really bring it down to a few essential qualities or practices or a few essential teachings. I came up with a few different formulations of what I would say of essence. So to me, it's not just one way to articulate it or formulate it. So what I wanted to just hang out tonight with is before we can even come to what's of essence. Actually, let me back up. When I say of what's of essence, I don't actually, I realize as I'm hearing myself say that may not be the best way to articulate what I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to say is just how can we not get too much of the complexity in and just bring down to sort of more the simpler formulation of one or two or three or four things that we can really handle and keep alive in our minds. You can't keep in your mind, and you wouldn't want to all at once, 12 links of dependent origination, all 8 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path, 6 sense bases, 7 factors of enlightenment, 5 aggregates. I could just keep going. These lists go on and on. You wouldn't want to do that. Many people, again, as I've said, find it's useful to have explored those things and have some fluency with them. So it's all there if you need it and you don't have to think about it. So it's, again, each of us are different. I've found, over the years, I've put a lot of time into all of those things. And so those lists are kind of there and it's not confusing. And I just have a good overall sense of it. but I'm not thinking about all those things all the time. You would drive yourself crazy. And I don't know that it would be, even if you could do it, if it would be helpful. So for me, I've found that my practice has gotten very, very simple. There's just this moment to moment wakefulness and awareness, and then is the mind caught in clinging or not? Is the heart open and closed? And then we learned how to just work moment by moment in deepening and letting go and non-clinging, deepening in the opening of our hearts. So that's one way I've shared here in this group of articulating kind of what's more foundational and simple way to bring it together. But even with that, it's not always so easy. What do? We sort of need to bring the complexity back in, because maybe we need a lot of different approaches, a lot of tools in our toolkit, because depending on what's going on, either what the circumstances are or what's going on in our minds and how we relate or meet the circumstance, we may need a lot of different tools at different times to help us open up into a simple state of consciousness or being. And so the question, if we step back, is, um, well, what is our goal? What are we even aiming for? And I just want to say a little bit tonight here, and then maybe in the next couple of weeks, a few different articulations on how my own sense of what might be of essence there. And so, the goal, again, it's not for me or anyone to tell you, but I'll throw a few things out. I don't know every single person on the group tonight, but most people I know and have heard this, but I just want to sort of put it in the space here and say it out. So as a common place that for our discussion, you don't have to, of course, you don't have to adhere to or believe in the traditional view of the teachings. But that is one way that a number of people, many people, do hold their goal. And that gets into the traditional view of, well, if you really want to understand Buddhist teachings, whether you believe it or not, you at least have to understand the traditional, where it's coming from. And it's coming from a place of a whole, just incredible cosmology of untold countless, lives. This whole teachings on rebirth, multiple lifetimes, and karma, and that there's many forms of existence, many places to be reborn, many states of being, and that this cycle is just going on and on, reborn according to our karma. And I think most of us have, you could spend a lot of time just studying those teachings, but most people have heard that and have some understanding of that. And so if you really go back to any of the articulations of the oldest Buddhist texts, it's always within the context of putting that whole process to an end. There's this word samsara that literally means wandering. So the idea is you're wandering through all these realms of existence according to our karma, and you can have more pleasant births, less pleasant births, up and down and through all this. And the traditional teachings are that at some point there's a weariness of it, or there's this term had enough called nibbida, which is sometimes translated as disgust. But that seems to me to have a tinge of aversion in it. I don't like that. I guess maybe the quality of disgust can be helpful sometimes, I suppose. But the real meaning, if you get down to the etymology of the word, it's more like just a weariness or had enough of. And so one way to think about it, even if you don't think of the traditional cosmology or the traditional larger view to hold the teachings, you can just take it right down into just what's going on in your own life. And the idea is, to the extent our lives are going well and things are working well, great. But to the extent that, what is the, I forgot who said this, but there's the famous quote I'm going to mess it up, but it's something basically to the effect of, sort of the quintessence of stupidity is to keep trying the same things over and over. You've all heard this quote, right? But expecting a different approach. And that's a lot of the Dharma, right? It's asking us to just look right into our lives and ask, like, well, how's it going? And, for most of us, life's a mix of pleasant and unpleasant, suffering and happiness. Um, and we keep trying the same strategy, right? This is basic Dharma here, over and over, of trying to have more and more pleasant experiences and avoiding unpleasant experiences, and try to change our circumstances. And I think at some point, from a Dharma perspective, it's asking us to just step back and check in and see, how's that working for us? How's it been going? And for most people, it's probably a mixed mixed bag of success and failure. And so the Dharma is saying, well, there might be another way, since life has its ups and downs, and it just happens due to its own causes and conditions. Only so much may be within our control. What if we were to make a shift? It's called going against the stream, which is against the way of probably most of us ordinarily would think of it. And instead of spending all our time trying to change our circumstances, what if we put some amount of effort, maybe a lot, into uh, uh, accepting things as they are and learning how to let go, and basically changing how we relate to what's happening. It doesn't mean you stop trying to change your situation and improve circumstances. We're not going to stop doing that, I don't think. Probably none of us will. But how much will we uh, again, just shift how we relate to what's happening and bring more of an acceptance. And so this is kind of standard Dharma that we hear a lot. So that's one way to articulate kind of a goal from a Dharma perspective. You may have the traditional view, which is a vast cosmological view, and ending this whole wandering on samsara. And that's, some people have that. I don't happen to hold that view myself. And I've been, a Dharma practitioner and a Theravada Buddhist for many, many years. So I don't have an opinion of it's right or wrong. I'm just sharing from my own view. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I just don't happen personally to think that way. I'm just more interested in just the actual moment to moment reality of my life. And what can I do now to deepen in non-clinging? What can I do now to um, deepen in love? Really, it's a kind of a simple articulation for myself. And then, each of us, I hope, if you haven't done this, I'm sure most of you have, but it's really worth spending some time consciously reflecting on, because a lot of people in their Dharma practice maybe have never articulated. Maybe it's hard to articulate what their spiritual goals are, their Dharma goals, their goals in life, or however you want to say it, your goals just as a human being. What are you aiming for? What are the things you want to grow within your own qualities in your own heart and minds? What are the qualities you want to stop feeding and stop growing and have them kind of, start to lessen in strength and an impact on us? And so it's good to reflect on that. I think in a real, maybe even just a little bit every day, just to think about and it gets into intention. What's my intention? How do I want to use my day? How do I want to use these few moments? How do I want to use my life? And that can really inform then what we're aiming for. So I'm naming it in a few different ways because, of course, for each of us, we'll come at this in a different way. However we get there, it can be it can be as simple as when I first started my meditation practice. I remember I was either 17 or 18 years old, and I was just learning to meditate, and I I was drawn to it. I didn't know really, I hadn't articulated it, but all I knew was I was terrified of death. And I had this sense that, I don't know, I the best I can remember back, I had a sense that somehow these people who were doing these mystical, transcendent meditative practices are touching into something that they know that I want to know. I don't know if I articulated any clear. It was a vague sense, but it was something like that, because I don't want to die. I was too terrified of dying. uh, until I got what those men and women had. It was vague, but it was something like that. So that was what brought me into it, and I don't think I had it any clearer than that in my mind. And over the course of a life, things change, but that's kind of what started me out, and I wasn't clearer than that. But that's enough. So wherever we're at with it, the clearer we can be, then now we start bringing in and say, well, what's going to support me in that goal? And of course, we come and we meditate. By definition, we're a meditation group here, so everyone here is either a meditator, unless, I don't know, maybe, your friend, pulled you along to join the group tonight. You're checking it out. Maybe you're not a meditator. I don't know. But most of us here are dedicated practitioners. We've seen for ourselves some of the fruits that can come. And it shouldn't surprise us that we get fruits, because in whatever way we apply ourselves, those are the qualities that are going to strengthen. I was reflecting on it because I've been with my son. I've been getting into doing a little bit of mountain biking. And at my age, I'm not going to, you're not going to see me making a YouTube video about going down some awesome hill or anything like that. But, I'm getting a little better. My skills are coming. I can actually think. I used to be, it's just a thing to do. It's exercise. I enjoy it. I get to go out with my family. That's what kind of got me into it. My son, he's a lot better than me, and he's more fearless. So it used to be, it's different than riding on the road. For any of you who've done much mountain biking, you can get on all kinds of trails, fire roads, dirt roads, anything. And some of the trails are steeper than others, whether it's up or down in both ways. And also some of them, they use the term, they're technical, meaning you're going over rocks or jumps or roots or whatever it is, and they can be narrow and windy. And so they can get harder and harder. And I don't have any grand goals to be great, but it's kind of fun. And what I've noticed is, just by doing it, I want to be safe. And so, but it used to be, I felt scared going just much of any speed at all. And if there was any kind of bump, it was just, I could barely deal with it at all. And I'd get off and have to walk around. And now, just for having done it for, not that long, but been doing it this last year with my son, and I'm getting stronger, just as with anything, right? And not only that, but my balance is better. I've learned what I can trust and not. And now I can go at not compared to the super fast people, but I can go what feels like faster. And it's kind of fun. And I know what I can trust. And I'm on my balance, and I can bounce over these rocks and go down the hill. And I'm not afraid of falling. And it's just the set point of my comfort has just shifted just through the doing. And I think that's a great analogy for probably what many of us have found through Dharma practice. We start off in our practice, and I don't know about you, but I don't consider when I started, well, why should I have had any skill? No skill. I was new. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't sit still. My body hurt. All my psychology was roaring out every time I tried to sit still. It was hard, and it didn't feel good. And I don't know, why am I doing this? And oh yeah, that's right, I'm afraid of dying, or something. But if it wasn't for that, I don't know I must have been a lot of fear of dying, because I kept coming back, even though it was miserable meditating. But you know what? You stick with it, and it's like the mountain biking, your skills grow. And I know many of you, I don't know everyone's practice, but I've talked about for a number of the people who I can see on the call tonight, and you've seen fruits and benefits because you've applied yourself. So really, then we know that just through the doing, in whatever way we aim ourselves, we cannot help but help grow and deepen in those ways, regardless of how much we judge ourselves to have a good heart. We have to be careful in how we judge these things, because we can be self-critical, but to have an open, loving heart versus a grouchy heart, or how we judge ourselves, it gets better, and we can move in a good direction. Our ability to let go of clinging and rest in sort of the stream of the flow of, in harmony with the acceptance of life as it is, right? All these things grows. So then one of the things I'm going to stop now, but I'm hoping as we continue in the next few weeks, I want to bring a few thoughts on to bring it in a simple package. And I want to offer it up. And perhaps you can reflect on your own simple packaging. Maybe you don't want to package it simpler. I mean, it's not even for me to say that. Again, it's this balance of the complexity and the simplicity supporting each other in each way. But I'm going to try to bring it in a way of packaging. What's in support of our goal? So I'm just going to assume, I'm going to stop in just a moment. I'm going to assume moving forward, I have to make some assumption because, as the person, as the person doing the talk, some of you might bring something else into the discussion time, but I'm going to assume that we're talking about the basic kind of, I assume to some degree, shared goal of what we call a liberation through non-clinging, and also deepening in all the heart qualities that go along with that. And then how we can formulate it in a way that can be the most supportive for us.